Yes, Girish, we'll give it a minute and then we'll start.
So let's start. Satya, do you want
to? Hey, Girish, should we start the call?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, great. Yeah, hello. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Satya Ishwaran. I lead our industry group that's called Telecom, Media and Technology. And we're going to briefly introduce, and I'll pass it on to Girish, who leads our media and entertainment business, who will walk us through a presentation. I want to start off by saying that whoever said life is a game, play it well, had a great sense of humor. Gaming is now a very serious business as India emerges as one of the fastest growing markets for what we call online casual gaming, which incidentally also has the world's second largest user base at about 433 million. Poised for revenue growth at about 3x times of what we have today by 2025. This space is also keenly watched by investors and corporates. India's overwhelmingly mobile-first gaming market has led to this high-paced progress of the segment in the last 5 years. Now, KPMG India's report, Beyond the Tipping Point, a primer on online casual gaming in India, aims to deep dive into the ecosystem and the market potential for online casual gaming in the country. The purpose of this report is to simplify the definition of the segment and its constitutional layers, as Girish will walk us through. I want to say that, what was eat, work, game, sleep, repeat has become the way of life as all the gaming metrics, be it downloads, average time spent on gaming, or the conversion from a daily active user to a paid user, are all now witnessing a robust spike as compared to the pre-lockdown time, right? So that is one of the tipping points that this pandemic has introduced. We foresee the casual online gaming subsegment in India going from a size of about INR 60 billion in FY21 to about 3 times, as I said before, by FY25. What is likely to drive this growth is both demand side factors, such as growth in digital infrastructure, a young population coming up, and an increasing adoption of digital payments. Some of the supply side sprinters have been a supply of world-class gaming titles because of Indian studios achieving scale, active investor interest, localization of gaming content, and ecosystem growth factors such as adoption of esports in India. The industry clearly is on cloud nine with the advent of cloud gaming and emerging technologies as augmented reality, virtual reality, AR, VR, and artificial intelligence. India is clearly making its mark as one of the fastest growing gaming markets globally, right? And again, I want to thank you for taking the time with us today. I want to hand the session over to my colleague Girish, who again heads our media and entertainment business, and who will walk you through the insights gathered from the study. And then we will wait on questions after that. We'll be happy to take as many questions and take it from there. Girish, over to you.
Thanks, Satya, and hello everybody. And like Satya said, thank you so much for taking the time out and listening to us today. So we launched our report, Beyond the Tipping Point, which is essentially focusing on online casual gaming in India, right? So just for to avoid any kind of confusions or clarifications, when we say online casual gaming, we are effectively differentiating it from the real money games and the fantasy sport products that exist in India, right? So it's pretty much everything else that India plays on online. So that's the context of what this report is about. And just like a quick, history to this is that we've been, as KPMG, coming out with a report on media and entertainment for now 13 odd years. And over the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen a tremendous growth in, the gaming sector. And that's something that is also starting to receive a lot of coverage from us in terms of our research work in the space, right? We've also come out with a couple of reports earlier on the fantasy sports segment, but we felt that uh, the whole casual gaming segment, which, like Satya mentioned, has the largest user base in India, potentially is not sort of getting the kind of assessment or depth of coverage that is needed for for the business to be understood by by people out there. And it is a complex business with multiple elements in it, and it sort of sits on the the border between technology and content, right? So it's in that sense a very tricky business to to run and evaluate. And that's the reason we felt it made sense to have a report which sort of covers all of these elements in one place. So let me sort of take you through the key highlights of the report. Our report, for your reference, is available on the KPMG website. The invites that have come to you for the registration also includes the link to download the report for your reference. But in case anybody is unable to source that, please reach out to any of us on the call, and we will obviously share the report with you as separately. With that, let me just sort of take you through the key highlights of this report. Lalita, can we go on to the first slide, please? Lalita?
I'm trying, but the slide isn't changing. One second. Sorry, Rima, I can't hear you.
Lalita, left side bottom arrow keys.
Yeah, I'm doing the same. Yeah.
Sorry, apologies, everybody. Just give us a minute.
Yeah.
Also, copy, you could right click and say next.
Yes, Girish, you can go ahead now.
So just at the outset, right, I think there are a couple of elements that I just wanted to clarify, right? And I think the reason I mentioned this is when we tend to talk about gaming, right, what are the kind of references that come to mind are either your PUBGs and your Rotas and Call of Duty, so your all your mid-core, hardcore games that come to mind, the traditional gamer, so to say, or you have your fantasy sports or your real money games, all of which have seen a lot of traction over the recent years, and they tend to pop to mind. And and I think the point that we wanted to bring out is that when you look at India and when you look at the mass audiences in India, it's fundamentally about casual games, whether it's hyper casual, casual, classic, and even certain elements of mid-core and hardcore games, right? And in fact, 97% of the gaming user base in India are people who play casual games, right? Similarly, when you start looking at other ways to categorize the space, when you look at the device, ecosystem, globally, console gaming and PC gaming have sort of led the way, and they've been sort of laying the foundation of gaming behavior and the gaming ecosystem for a while now. And mobile gaming, while has seen a lot of traction, PC consoles still continues to be a main driver in mature markets. In India, on the other hand, fundamentally, it's largely been about mobile gaming. And today, 91% of the gaming user base, our assessment is, are actually mobile gamers. Right? Obviously, there will be overlaps, but almost a large proportion of them actually play mobile games. Even when you look at monetization models, India is unique. Like a lot of other media businesses and digital businesses, India has seen ad-led free-to-play models actually drive growth. And if you look at the mix today, 60% odd of the revenues actually come from ad revenues for casual games, as compared to maybe about 2% odd globally, right? So that's a big shift in terms of how businesses get monetized in India as compared to global markets. And finally, when you also look at the type of gamer, again, we are dominated by the casual gamer, and they, are the largest share of the market in terms of the kind of gamers, right? And I think that again, has lessons in terms of what kind of user behavior we can expect from them, and what kind of current levels of maturity we should expect from the gamer today. Can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, Lalita, is this a problem? Should I do my screen share?
Yes, Girish.
Girish, hold on, let me beam up. Rima, I'm taking over the rights, okay? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Neha. So the second aspect that I just wanted to talk about at the beginning, just to set the context, is again, if you look at the value chain of gaming in India, while the core value chain is not very different from how it sort of operates globally, right? With a IP brand owner and a studio, and a publisher, and then you have the mobile, the app store sort of distributing the product, and then finally you have devices and the gamer, right? That is not very different in India, but there are two or three interesting changes in the way it has evolved, right? I think firstly, because India has largely been a mobile-led market, most of the gaming distribution has sort of happened through the app stores. This has meant that there was never historically any need for large publishers to come and distribute, because the distribution models were very well set through the app stores, and the individual developers were able to reach their customers directly. So while this sort of democratized the distribution model, what it also meant is that it did not result in a large publishers evolving in India, and therefore scale became a challenge for a lot of the developers, and that's, I think, something that India is sort of struggling with. Whereas if you look at global markets, publishers, and there are significantly large businesses who have evolved around publishers, and publishers over time have evolved into studios and development businesses themselves, and developers who sort of evolved into the whole publisher model, right? So I think that change, again, console-led versus mobile-led, has sort of resulted in the whole value chain itself evolving very differently in India. The other two or three key elements in terms of enablers for the gaming value chain: streaming platforms are starting to see traction in India. Esports is basically the flavor of the month. We are seeing a lot of traction, a lot of interest from gamers, and as that segment democratizes, we will see a huge push both on esports side as well as on the the trickle down effects on gaming, right? Another area which is seeing interesting traction in India is the whole multi-gaming platforms, which, while some forms exist globally, it is still something which is reasonably unique to India in terms of the way it is evolving, where you've got multiple games on one app and one platform, and gamers can essentially have one-stop shop in at least for certain kinds of games, right? So these are aspects where, while the core value chain remains the same in India, the way they've developed and evolved is quite different from the way it has evolved globally. Can we go to the next slide, please? So given that context, right, let's talk some numbers. As Satya mentioned at the beginning, right, we've got about 430 odd million users today, of which the largest number is casual gaming at about 420 million. If you look at the size of the market today, and I think this is where you see a bit of a dichotomy, right? So we are about 134 billion rupees today. But when you look at the mix of segments, RMG and OFS have much larger shares in comparison to their user base, whereas casual gaming at the moment is clearly under indexed when it comes to monetization, right? So we've got 60 billion rupees of market size as compared to 420 million users. When you look at device, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, we are largely mobile-driven market, and that sort of has significant implications on user behavior. When you look at how we got here, right, I want to break this out into two parts. And I think one of the points I want to mention is that while there is a lot of talk about how COVID impacted gaming and gaming behavior, and I'll talk about that in a minute, what I want to emphasize is that gaming as a market was growing very, very strongly even before that, right? So from 250 million size in FY18, we reached 400 million, by December 20. So this clearly tells us that, gaming was already growing. If anything, COVID, gave it incremental momentum, right? And what drove, gaming historically, particularly in the last few years, has definitely been, a technology infrastructure development, whether it is digital connectivity, whether it is smartphones, whether it is the whole penetration of digital behavior through, the entire demographics of the country. Even on the supply side, both global and Indian games, both the supply as well as the quality of games have improved significantly. And also what's interesting is, and this is seen, with the whole traction that we've seen on RMG and OFS, is that there is a higher affinity for Indians to pay for games where there are there's some sort of competitive spirit and a monetary incentive at the end of the exercise. And that seems to have given a fair amount of very initial traction to both OFS and RMG. And I think that has triggered a lot of historical growth. Can we go to the next slide, please? And like I mentioned, while all of this was happening, COVID-19, when it, the pandemic, when it hit with all its tragedy, I think among some of the few segments which actually got positively impacted, gaming has been one of the most positively impacted segments, right? And what happened really was when the original lockdown happened, last year, we saw a big bump up in, pretty much all gaming metrics, right? Whether it is downloads, whether it is active users, whether it is time spent, consumer spends, all of that grew pretty significantly, right? And in a lot of ways, this was not unexpected, given that there was also at the same time, restrictions and constraints on entertainment options availability, no activity for people to do, no ways to step out. It effectively meant that they did move towards gaming as, as a way of, entertainment. So it was, so the worry was at that time that, we would see a significant drop off, subsequent to the lockdowns lifting up. But what was interesting for us, and when you look at the statistics, is that yes, there was a drop off, but we still ended up at a higher normal than it was pre-COVID, right? Across, again, all monetization metrics. And this is, is something that seems to have sustained since those initial periods of the lockdown, right? And I think that sort of gives the confidence that a lot of the behavior that got initiated during the lockdown period and the pandemic seems to have translated at least partially into habit formation. And that's sort of resulting in more people playing games than before, playing more often than before, and playing for longer than before. And all of these three are very critical metrics when it comes to being able to monetize the gaming results. Can we go to the next slide, please? So given where we were and what sort of drove all of this, let's talk for a minute on where are we headed, right? So if you look at the gaming market size today, like I said, we are about 60 billion rupees today, and that number is expected to, and this I'm talking about for the casual gaming segment in particular, right? And that number is expected to go to 169 million, almost 3x growth, little less than that. With continuing share, almost equal growth coming both from the IAP and ad revenues, right? Our gaming user base itself is expected to grow from 430 odd million to 650 odd million, and ARPUs are again expected to reach close to double in the next few years or so, right? When you look at the market size again, overall market to grow from 134 billion to 284 billion. And like what's interesting for us is, again, it's a mix of both ad and IAP revenues, which is going to drive all of this. What is important is to note that as we go forward, a lot of the growth will start coming in more from the casual side and why comparatively lower from RMG and OFS. So while those businesses will continue to grow very solidly, in comparison, they will be slower for a couple of reasons, right? One, these markets are these businesses are already starting to see some level of maturity. Still a long way to go, but at least in some of the more larger cities, we're starting to see some level of maturity there. And secondly, there are also been regulatory challenges with bans and a few states, and regulatory uncertainty, which is sort of holding back the growth and evolution of some of these segments, at least to its full potential. So I think those are a couple of things to keep in mind. But casual gaming as a segment is definitely seeing a fair amount of traction as we go forward. So while these were the numbers and our sense of where we will get to, I think what's the next angle to think about is what's going to take us there, right? So let's break it down into demand side factors and supply side factors. And I think at the outset, what I would like to mention is that the foundation of this growth is the growing digital penetration and sophistication, which in turn leads to a greater sophistication among the gaming user in themselves, right? And this is important because if you step back a second and look at the history of gaming in India, literally it's since 2015 onwards that we've seen this huge cycle of growth that has come up, which effectively means that an average gamer is essentially less than, at best a few, maybe 3 or 4 years old, if you look at the mass user. And that is not realistically adequate time for gaming behavior to mature, right? So the point that we want to make it out at the outset is that this is going to change. As both digital penetration and sophistication increases, and as gaming behavior becomes more sophisticated, that will have significant implications on the ability of businesses to monetize their games, right? That's one, that's an overarching statement I want to make. Outside of this, there are, I think, 2 or 3 other key elements that are happening. I think the acceptance of online gaming, and this saw a huge fillip during the pandemic, is in the sense gaming traditionally did have a sort of negative perception among, at least more traditional users and traditional demographics. And that has started to change significantly during the pandemic, where essentially really there was no choice. And that meant that there was greater interest levels on gaming, and the whole resistance or perception has started to change quite dramatically, right? And I think that is a big driver in taking gaming into the heart of India and into deeper into the, into the demographics of India. Another key point that I also want to mention is, as we go forward, we think the entire esports model in India is going to get much, much more democratized and go beyond the core user base that currently exists to the larger mass users. And similarly, on the supply side also, that's going to get democratized. And that effectively means that there will be a follow-on effect on gaming in general and gaming behavior in general. So that's on the demand side factors, right? On the supply side factors, I think 2 or 3 key elements are sort of happening, right? I think the first big element is happening is that gaming is becoming more and more of a social engagement product, both with people playing, multiplayer gaming and people playing against and with each other, as also integration of chat apps and voice integration, and all of that effectively means that it is, going more and more towards, having deeper social interactions as, an integrated element of gaming. And that, I think, is going to have a significant bearing on how gameplay develops and how gaming gets picked up, and how user behavior matures, right? A supply of game developers and titles, again, is something that we are going to see a fair amount of traction. India currently, while we see a huge user base, a lot of those users play global games, and there are a few Indian games which have started to make traction, but not enough developers or studios have developed scale, right? So a lot of the numbers that you see here is basically revenues made in India by pretty much everybody, every game that is available in India. So not all of this money goes to Indian studios, but as the supply of titles and the quality of titles improves from India, we think that even the Indian studios have a significant opportunity to scale up over here. The last point that I would also like to mention is all of this obviously requires significant support and funding. And with the growth in the gaming market, we are also seeing a fair amount of investments by global firms, and funds to and which is sort of giving the kind of financial support that is needed for studios to be able to scale up. Can we go to the next slide, please? Like I mentioned, core to all of this that is going to happen is, the growing digital maturity of the Indian user, right? And just as a reference point, we had actually done an exercise a couple of years back where, we sort of tried to assess when will India have 1 billion digital users and who are they going to be, right? So we sort of categorized them as, sophisticates, enthusiasts, and mainstream users. And our assessment was that a bulk of the users in India over time, or at least in the initial phases, are going to be mainstream mass users who with increasing maturity will become enthusiasts and sophisticates, and therefore their digital behavior will also see an evolution, right? And that is something that we expect to see playing out even in the gaming side. As both digital and gaming behavior becomes mature, you will see positive follow-on implications on the ability to monetize these users also, right? A quick other point to add on to this is post-pandemic, when we sort of revisited the timelines on these numbers, right? Our assessment was that the entire digital pickup in the country has got accelerated, and we probably are going to see us reach these numbers maybe a year and a half earlier than that was originally envisaged. Can we go to the next slide, please? And all said and done, right? So all of this obviously gives you the size and potential, but just to also do a quick reality check, we are still way far away in terms of the potential of what is possible from where we are today, right? I mean, you look at some of the developed markets with lower number of gamers. I mean, if I take US as an example, right? Lower number of gamers, about half of what India has, but the ARPUs are, 10x, actually not even 10, 100x, 200x of what we are today, right? And I think that is a big difference. It is probably not a fully correct comparison also, that being said, because the reason we see a lot of strong ARPU and monetization behavior globally is because of the fact that these markets had a very strong console and PC gaming history for the last 30, 40 years. And those, and those gamers have over time culturally got to a situation of being comfortable with paying for gaming as a form of entertainment. And that has meant that, you've had fairly high monetization and consumer spend potentials in those markets. India pretty much leapfrogged the console generation, gone directly into mobile and a lot of free-to-play products, which has effectively meant that the ability to monetize has been hampered at this current point, right? But like I mentioned at the beginning, we still have the second largest gamers in the market, and it's one of the fastest growing markets globally. So the potential and the headroom for these numbers to grow is significant. And while we may not get to the kind of ARPUs that we've seen in the mature markets, we do believe that we should still see a strong growth in monetization potential of the Indian gaming market. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I think that's what I want to address now in terms of, while we spoke about all of these numbers and the numbers look good and great, where are they going to come from, right? How are you going to make money, right? And fundamentally, there are two parts to this, like we had mentioned earlier. India is at its core advertisement-led gaming market, which is not very unusual when it comes to digital or entertainment businesses in India, right? Whether it's television, whether it is radio, whether it is digital, we continue to be an ad-dominated market, and most of these segments, particularly on the digital side, are seeing strong subscription traction, but we are still some distance away before they become sizable in comparison to advertising, right? So in that context, when you look at the gaming segment also, we are ad driven. 60% of casual gaming revenue today comes from advertising. We think that that number is going to continue to grow at an industry level, almost triple, maybe slightly less than that over the next few years or so. And the reason, that we are, that we feel that this is very likely to happen is two or three pieces to it, right? One, I think, as the base grows, and more importantly, as the engagement levels for games are growing, brands are starting to take more interest in gaming as a model for advertising, right? Traditionally, most of the gaming ads have been largely programmatic ads, with very little, campaign level thinking that's gone into by brands into these advertising models, and they don't really feature too highly on any ad budgets of any of the brands in India, right? That is starting to change, and we believe, as the numbers start becoming more attractive, you will see more traction on the brand side. The related angle also is that gaming is, you have the ability to get more actionable and measurable ads, placed around gaming. And with, ad tech platforms are, specifically focused on gaming is also evolving in India. I think that again is going to give a lot of, comfort and confidence to brands to start betting on gaming as an ad model, right? But out of all of this, I think what is going to be a very, very core trigger to ad revenue growth is actually the rewarded ad formats. And let me spend a couple of minutes sort of talking about that. Neha, can you go to the next slide, please? Right. So if you look at rewarded ads, right, and what, so let's spend a couple of minutes talking what are rewarded ads. So rewarded ads in a very simple manner is honestly no different from an IAP, right? An in-app purchase, right? You're playing a game and you need something. Either you need a life, you need more time, you need to buy some, weapons or move to the next level, or some accessories. You have two options, and that those options are becoming more frequent, right? Earlier, it was fundamentally about paying money, in-app purchases, and then, accessing those products, right? Or accessing those, those lives or whatever else that you might want. Rewarded ads effectively replace that in-app purchase model, where you're effectively saying, okay, if you don't want to pay, fine, give me, why don't you watch an ad, and in return for watching that ad, you will get certain value, right? Whether that is an extra life, whether that is accessories or whatever else a game developer might choose to incorporate. Now, the reason, this gets interesting is because, assuming you're able to maintain a sensible balance between gameplay and advertising, you are able to get to a large number of users who potentially would be interested in, the value that you get, but from the gameplay, but at the same time are hesitant to pay. But you can now replace that with watching an ad, right? They can obviously choose when to watch, an ad, and, and decide at what points whether they want to watch, not want to watch, quit or not. All those models exist. And what we've seen is, and a couple of surveys that got published globally indicates that even globally, there is a lot of interest levels on rewarded ads as a model, with more than 50% of gamers on, on a couple of surveys indicate that they would choose rewarded ads as a preferred mode of play, right? And these are in developed, mature markets. So let me talk for a minute on why is this relevant and interesting for India as a market. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. So in India, I think the fundamental point is, and we all tend to make this statement, right? Indians don't like to pay for content. While it's probably a very, very high level, motherhood statement, and the reality, is, sits somewhere in the middle. I think Indians do like to pay when they get value, but in general, if there are other modes to entertain themselves without needing to pay, they would be happy to do so, right? And they have shown this when it comes to television. They've shown this when it comes to digital, particularly OTT, where ad-led models have evolved faster and earlier in India than they've evolved globally. So clearly, Indians don't mind watching advertising in return for entertainment. Obviously, a balance is needed, but they don't mind doing that. That culturally, that exists, right? That's one angle of it, right? The second angle is, as gaming behavior develops and it starts becoming more, more habitual for a lot of the mass gamers, Rewarded ads give them the opportunity to move ahead in the game without needing to actually pay for that. And that we believe is actually going to see a significant amount of traction from users. The reality is it's still early days, right? If you look at rewarded ads, while they've been around for a while globally, even globally, they've started to pick up traction in the last 2 to 3 years. If you look at India, again, it started to see more, pickup and development, particularly with Indian developers over the recent, year or so. And, and already we are starting to see, a push in that direction, right? Even from CPMs, while it's comparable to what video ads could be, with a being a far newer ad format, the expectation is that because these are more measurable and potentially have the ability to have a semi-captive audience with some level of call to action in that, we think that brands will look at this space much more positively, and that's actually going to help drive ad revenue monetization for games played in India. Right now, whether how much of that gets comes towards Indian developers and Indian games as compared to global games played in India, it really is a function of user base and user engagement, and we'll have to see how that plays out in terms of Indian companies building scale. Can we go to the next slide, please? The other angle, obviously, core to what happens globally, even in India, it is 40% of casual gaming revenues, is the whole in-app purchase model, right? And typically, why do users pay for pay within games, right? It's either to progress, to unlock milestones, to escape grinding, skip levels, or to socialize, compete, in a multiplayer format, right? And in that context, right, when you step back a second and look at the Indian market, and if you assess why India has trouble monetizing games, I think it's a function of the fact, to a large extent, two things, right? One, we didn't have a console gaming history, and therefore not a culture of payment for games at scale didn't exist. The second angle is that the gaming behavior is still nascent outside of the core gaming universe. A lot of the new users are really anywhere between 3 to 4, 5 years old in the system, and they will need time to become more and more mature, right? And the other angle, which is also important, is while this has started to change, when you look at the price points for products in India, a lot of the price points are not really adjusted for purchase parity in India, and therefore are quite expensive for a gamer in terms of the value it provides to the gamer. And I think that change is also something that is needed for this space, the monetization on the in-app purchases side to go. Neha, can you go to the next slide, please? Therefore, what's the, how do you go beyond the whales, right? I mean, basically those top 2% of guys who give you bulk of your revenues, how do you increase your monetization beyond that? And I think few aspects on that, we think that will help that and help monetization of IAPs to grow in India is, like I said, one, pricing. Definitely, it needs to be something that has to be developed in a way which is far more value accretive in an Indian gamer's mindset. And we've seen this work. If you look at OTT also, price points for OTT products in India are far lower than what their global counterparts will be charging. And similarly, global pricing and India pricing is also very different for the same product when it comes to OTTs, right? So I think there is an aspect to be explored over there. I think there are a couple of other angles to think about as you see localization of content, right? Content which is more tuned to Indian culture, ethos, and familiarity. It does make a big difference, right? So if you see the top games, in the country, you've got games in categories like Ludo, you've got Teen Patti, you've got cricket, and a few others. These are all, in a lot of ways, ingrained into Indian culture, and users are familiar, and that seems to definitely give some traction, incremental traction to Indian studios as compared to products which are very me too as compared to global competition, right? So I think that's an important thing to also keep in mind. A couple of other areas. One, social aspect. I think that's again a big change. We're starting to see, games sort of with multiplayer gaming and replacing or not replacing, reinforcing social interaction. I think the ability to monetize through that engagement levels is again very high. And finally, I think the other important point I want to put out there is investment in artificial intelligence and analytics and understanding gaming behavior and being able to predict gamer behavior is very, very critical when it comes to monetization of consumer spends. And as Indian companies will invest more and more into that, I think we will see that traction also develop. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. Another point that I do want to make is, and this is again probably something that could explore be explored in India very differently from what's happening globally, right? It's available that's the whole subscription-based monetization model. It's there globally in a limited way. It's been fairly successful on the console gaming space with game passes and stuff, both on Sony and Xbox, right? I think that's that traction, business model is probably likely to see a fair amount of traction in India, and I think the reason again is it sort of enables Indians to effectively get more value for the money that they will put in, and we are starting to see multi-gaming platforms develop, and you will see them evolve with subscription models also. In OTT, again, subscription models are starting to see traction as users realize that a certain amount of money can see a fair amount of value in terms of their entertainment that they get. Not something that we have not seen before. We've seen a version of it with value-added services, mobile VAS models, where gaming used to be existing and be provided by a telco on deck. I think a version of those models could evolve and play out very well in India as we go forward. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. So quickly, I think 3 or 4 broad themes that I wanted to also talk about as to what will have significant bearing and implications on gaming as we go forward. And I think the first point that I do want to mention is esports. Esports, essentially, while the segment itself will see a significant traction in terms of the size of the market, but what we are also more interested in is that the follow-on effect and the symbiotic effect it will have on the gaming universe and the behavior of gamers itself, right? I think the key change that will come through over here, and Neha, you can just go to the next slide, please. Right, is fundamentally when esports itself becomes democratized, right? As we go to a situation where we have more titles, particularly local titles which Indian gamers, mass gamers are more familiar with, right? Or more, titles which are more mobile driven and not necessarily console driven. I think given that a large amount of players in India are mobile players, and as we create esports tournaments across different categories of games, doesn't necessarily need to be hardcore or mid-core titles, right? You could see Ludo competitions, you could see, carom competitions. So we've seen a cricket, gaming tournament happen recently. So the point is, as we get into games which are more familiar, which are more in Indian regional languages, which are more widespread in terms of the audiences that they target, I think that follow-on effect is going to play out very, very strongly on gaming and gaming behavior and gaming maturity, right? And with esports itself becoming a medal event at the Asian Games and recognized as a sport in many countries, and now I think it's also becoming a medal event in the following Olympics. I think that also is going to help push this entire ecosystem of esports, and that will again see a big follow-on impact on gaming behavior as such. Can you move to the next slide, please? The other key thing that I also wanted to talk about is cloud gaming and what does it mean for India, right? I mean, I think the reason we are very interested in cloud gaming as a concept is it effectively takes away the device constraint. I think fundamentally the pricing of devices for consoles has been a big constraint for console gaming to scale up in India. And what cloud gaming in theory does all you need is a screen and a joystick, and you can play a game anywhere, right? And it could be on your TV screen, or it could be on your mobile phone also. So this gives access to more sophisticated gaming titles and products to larger sections of the Indian audience who are currently constrained by lack of such access, right? Now, so the concept of this is very, very exciting, and it's got the potential to dramatically change the the maturity levels of gamers in India, right? But that being said, it's not without its challenges. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think fundamentally, cloud gaming relies on seamless high-speed connectivity to ensure there is low latency where when clouds are games are stored in the clouds and played from there, right? And currently, wired connectivity in India is at fairly low levels of penetration, and it is struggled to grow. While the speed of that connectivity is increasing, it's still a while away before it becomes a significantly sizable market in terms of wired connectivity, right? So what is therefore the solution to this? Our sense is 5G could essentially be the answer. And when 5G does get rolled out in India, it will make a huge difference to cloud gaming as an opportunity, and therefore providing access to the wider gaming universe, right? But while we are excited about what cloud gaming can do for gaming in India, I think we should take this with a pinch of salt in the sense, timing wise, we are still a while away, right? I think 5G trials have just started last week. We are a while away from the spectrum auctions, implementation of 5G. And then within that, when retail 5G will get rolled out, and to what scale and price points will it be offered, and therefore how many users will we end up at? There are all multiple ifs and buts that need to play out before we have visibility on 5G becoming at scale for gaming in India, right? So time-wise, I think we believe this is a while away, but when it does happen, it's got the potential to change gaming in India. Can we move to the next slide, please? We spoke a little bit about multi-gaming platforms in the subscription model. I think we're starting to see that play out with MPL and Paytm First Games and Winzo. And I think this works very, very well where you have mass users focusing on hyper casual and casual products, wherein effectively in one one platform, you're able to engage with multiple games, and you have the ability then to even monetize those users in multiple different ways, right? So I think this is an area which is very interesting and exciting, particularly as we see more gamers coming in from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. I think this may end up being good, strong entry points for a lot of these gamers into the whole gaming segment, right? Can we go to the next slide, please? The other area that we are, we see again a fair amount of interest going forward is game development and outsourcing of game development, right? So core development outsourcing, always happened for a while in India in terms of India being a back-end service provider, right? But what's starting to change is, as engines get developed, as technology platforms are getting developed, we are starting to see back-end as a service being provided, even by Indian companies who sort of build engines. And what this does is one provides new monetary sources for organizations, but what it also does is it enables smaller developers to reduce their investment cost and time to market, and therefore expand the pool of game developers and quality games coming from India. Can we go to the next slide, please? And finally, the last but probably the most critical and core point to all of this is AI, and how it's sort of evolving into hyper personalization, right? I think what excites us about AI is the ability to micro analyze a consumer and his gameplay behavior, and get to a position where the kind of gaming experience that a consumer A has will be different from a gaming experience that a consumer B has, depending on their skills, their motivations for playing, their gaming behavior, their payment behavior, and therefore your ability to engage a consumer as well as monetize them, increases significantly with the deeper knowledge of a consumer that you have. And with greater investments that are happening in AI, both globally as well as from Indian studios, I think we think this is actually going to be very critical lever for growth over the next few years, particularly when it comes to the ability to monetize a user, right? So can you go to the next slide, please? So I think that in summary sort of wraps up our discussion for today. I think 2-3 broad takeaways for us is that we are definitely going to see significant traction in number of users, as also in the monetization potential of those users. And it's going to be driven largely on the back of greater maturity of those users, improved supply, greater tech integration, and monetization models which are more India focused, like rewarded ads, like multiplayer platforms, subscription gaming. All of that evolving is actually going to drive a whole lot of this elements going forward. But like I said, I think the crux of what we need to keep in mind is gaming fundamentally is a global business, right? And there are no barriers to entry. So every gamer can be monetized by the games they would like to play. So a lot depends on the user base and the scale and the engagement levels that each studio is able to develop in India. And that will play out in terms of how they're able to monetize this market. With that, I would like to, thank all of you for, attending this call and listening to me. We've got about 5 minutes or so. So I'll take a few questions. The remaining questions, I'm happy to, respond to each of you through emails separately. So let me just ask, I think one point I do want to mention, and I made this point right at the beginning, is when we are talking about casual gaming, I think you need to keep in mind that casual games are essentially, for us, defined in a wider sense. It's basically non-RMG, non-fantasy sports gaming. That's what we are defining as casual gaming. Now, within this, if you look at genres of gaming, yes, there is something that is also called casual games. So the hyper casual, the casual, the mid-core, all of those also exist within that. But the definition that we are using over here is the wider definition of casual game to exclude, RMG and fantasy sports from this. Right? So the other thing that, the other point that I want to mention is one of the questions that been asked is about game streaming platforms. So I think we are starting to see a fair amount of traction happen out there. Game streaming platforms today are acting more as a enabler to the ecosystem, where they are actually, adding to the ecosystem in terms of the ability to stream content, stream gameplay, and therefore add to the viewers and users who would like to engage with games, right? So while Xbox, is already doing this on the, the console side, I think as the mobile ecosystem itself starts seeing greater gameplay and greater, streaming of mobile gameplay, I think that will that will be when we see traction on this. We've not really separately called out, game streaming platforms, but game streaming along with esports, we believe is going to be two key enablers which we could drive, which could drive a lot of this growth. The other point I think is, is something that I also want to mention is on app discoverability, right? It's a very interesting point because if you really look at the way gaming and mobile gaming, because it's been largely mobile gaming that has evolved, it's basically, if you the entire distribution of gameplay then started to happen through the app stores, both on Google and from Android and the what do you call Apple Play Store, right? Now, when this sort of started to happen, it sort of democratized the entire distribution space, which effectively meant that there was really no role for publishers to come. So what that meant is every game developer is essentially relying on the Google Play Store and the other app stores to actually distribute their product for them, right? And this obviously is leading to a discoverability issue. And our concern is that while apps are working with the respective app stores to improve discoverability, I think there needs to be other models of customer acquisition and marketing that have to be done over and beyond the core app store discoverability model, right? And we've seen this work reasonably well in other examples. So, for example, OFS and RMG products are not listed on the App Store, and therefore, they are seeing they spend a lot of their customer acquisition actually happens offline, right? And while that incurs significant customer acquisition costs, it is also demonstrated that non-App Store based customer acquisition is possible and can give a significant amount of traction, particularly if they are backed up by strong brand spends. We've also seen this with PUBG, for example, when they had originally launched in India. They started, they had also done television ads and other forms of marketing to really push their product out there. And that again saw a significant amount of traction, particularly as you go beyond the core gaming universe. I think in a couple of, I think we've got a couple of more minutes. Let me just also see which other questions I will be able to answer today. Okay, so I think there is a question that I can see on regional languages and importance of regional languages in games, right? I think 2-3 angles that need to be kept in mind, right? And I would want to step away from only calling it, making this about regional languages, but more about the localization of the games themselves, right? And these will work in 2 or 3 different ways, right? I think as you go deeper into the demographics of gamers, right, beyond the core gaming universe and beyond the top cities, it will be important for them, for games to be able to engage with the customers at a level they're familiar with, right? And I think the points to sort of keep in mind, therefore, is it's not, while game play by themselves, right? And a lot of games are fairly universal in nature and not really language driven, but a level of familiarity will help grow the gaming user base, particularly beyond the less sophisticated users, right? So it's partly about regional content and being able to speak and make available in regional languages, particularly games which are where the gameplay is somewhat complex and need an understanding of the gameplay or a better understanding of the gameplay. I think regional languages will help. Voice enabled gameplay and content is again important, again particularly where there are complex gameplay or searches or any other elements to be done. Voice activated elements will help. And finally, like I said, familiarity is important. And whether it is and some of the successes, right, whether it's a Ludo or a Teen Patti or some of the card games or even cricket, both on the fantasy side as well as on some of the gaming app side, does show that if there is a level of comfort that exists with the users, it is possible to for Indian companies also to get a significant scale out there. So I think that would be couple of aspects that I would sort of think about when it comes to localization of games, right? So I think given that we are sort of pretty much out of time, I would suggest, like I said, thank you so much for joining today. We've got all your questions noted down. We will separately respond to all of them one-on-one so that you don't have any clarifications that are left to be received. So in that context, thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to us at any point in time. And if you need to have a more detailed conversation, happy to sort of take you through the report and our thinking behind it, right? So in that context, thank you so much. And thanks for your time and all the best to all of you. Thanks.